The story of the Vietnam War does not begin with gunfire, helicopters, or the thunder of American boots landing on foreign soil. It begins with a quiet misunderstanding, one that would grow, over decades, into a storm so large that it would reshape nations, destroy millions of lives, and leave behind questions that still haunt generations. It starts with a small country divided between two worlds, ideologies, and two dreams of freedom. Vietnam, a land of rice paddies, ancient villages, and deep spiritual traditions, had survived centuries of foreign rule. But in the mid-20th century, it would become the center of a struggle far larger than itself. A struggle that neither side fully understood. When France finally loosened its grip after the First Indochina War, the world saw Vietnam as a fractured land. North aligned with communism, South backed by the West. America, believing it was defending freedom from the spread of communism, stepped into a story already burning. But what the politicians in Washington didn't realize was that Vietnam wasn't simply a battlefield. It was a nation fighting for its identity, its pride, and its future. Every family had a story, every village had a scar, and every soldier north or south fought with a conviction born from generations of struggle. In the early years, American advisors arrived with confidence and optimism. They believed that superior technology, training, and firepower could win the hearts and minds of a people whose lives were tied to the soil more than any modern ideology. But the jungle had its own rules, its own silence, its own way of swallowing foreign armies whole. Young American soldiers were told they were protecting democracy. Vietnamese villagers were told they were fighting for liberation. Yet most of them simply wanted peace, land, and the right to raise their families without fear. The first major battles didn't just test military strategies, they tested the limits of human endurance. Soldiers walked through dense forests where every leaf could hide danger. A still river, a rustle of grass, a quiet night hole could become the start of violence. Helicopters, the icons of the war, carried troops in and carried wounded boys out. The sound of their blades became the soundtrack of life and death. For many American soldiers, this was their first time leaving home, stepping into humidity that felt like a wall, surrounded by a language they couldn't understand, fighting an enemy they rarely saw. Vietnamese fighters, whether Viet Minh, Viet Cong, or the North Vietnamese Army, moved with a familiarity of the land that outsiders could never match. They dug tunnels that stretched for miles. They ate little, carried less, and survived conditions that broke stronger men. To them, this wasn't a foreign conflict, it was a continuation of a fight for independence, a mission passed down by elders who dreamed of a unified homeland. As the war expanded, so did the chaos. Television brought the battlefield into American living rooms. For the first time, families watched the war unfold every night, burning villages, crying children, exhausted soldiers staring into cameras with hollow eyes. Public support cracked. Politicians promised victory, but the young men returning home told a different story, one of confusion, shifting goals, and an enemy that seemed invisible yet everywhere.
Back in Vietnam, the cost was unbearable. Villages were destroyed, families torn apart, and ancient lands turned into fire. Children grew up beneath bombing raids, learning to run before they learned to read. For soldiers on every side, morality blurred. Right and wrong became hard to define when every decision carried the weight of survival. A soldier firing into the jungle never truly knew who he was fighting. A villager helping one side in the morning could be forced by the other side by nightfall. Every year, new strategies were announced: more troops, more bombing, more firepower, but the war seemed to grow deeper, not closer to ending. The more America pushed, the stronger local resistance grew. The belief that communism was spreading across the world had driven the intervention, but in the rice fields and villages of Vietnam, ideology mattered far less than dignity and independence. By the late 1960s, the war had consumed everything. At home in America, protests filled the streets. Young men burned draft cards. Mothers begged politicians to bring their sons back. Soldiers returned with wounds both visible and hidden. Many couldn't explain what they had experienced, because even they didn't fully understand why they were sent to fight a war that increasingly felt unwinnable. Yet in the chaos, there were moments of humanity. American soldiers giving water to wounded enemies. Vietnamese villagers protecting injured Americans simply because compassion outweighed ideology. Letters sent from soldiers to their families filled with longing for peace revealed a shared human truth. Everyone, on every side, was tired of bloodshed. When the Tet Offensive erupted, the world saw a turning point. Cities once considered safe were engulfed in combat. The American public realized victory was far from near. Confidence collapsed. Leaders struggled to explain how a war fought with such intensity had only grown more uncertain. Soldiers on the ground witnessed the brutality firsthand. House-by-house battles, streets littered with fear, and a growing sense of futility. As years passed, negotiations came and went. Promises were made and broken, and slowly, painfully, America began to pull back. But leaving did not mean peace. The South Vietnamese fought on, trying to defend a fragile government under enormous pressure. When Saigon finally fell in 1975, the world watched in silence. Helicopters lifted the last Americans from rooftops as desperate civilians clung to hope, or to anything they could grab. It was an ending filled with heartbreak, confusion, and unanswered questions. In the aftermath, Vietnam rebuilt from ashes. Fields were cleared of mines. Families searched for missing loved ones. Wounds, psychological and physical, took decades to heal. America, too, struggled with its own scars. Veterans returned to a nation divided, sometimes unwelcoming, often unsure how to understand what they had endured. Many carried memories they could not escape: brothers lost, promises broken, images of war burned into the mind. Over time, both nations began to face the truth. The war had no simple heroes or villains. It was a tragedy built on fear, pride, politics, and misunderstanding. Ordinary people, farmers, students, poor families, young soldiers paid the price for decisions made far away in rooms of power. The story of the Vietnam War became a story of lessons, the limits of force, the danger of misreading a nation's heart. The cost of believing victory can be measured by numbers or firepower.
Yet, within the sorrow lies a deeper message. Human beings, despite unimaginable suffering, find ways to rise. Veterans built new lives. Vietnamese families healed broken lands. Two nations that once fought a brutal war eventually became partners, trading goods, exchanging culture, and sharing stories. The spirit of survival, reconciliation, and learning from the past became the war's final legacy. Today, when we look back, we see more than battles. We see mothers waiting for sons who never returned. We see soldiers who carried friendships stronger than fear. We see villagers who kept hope alive in the darkest nights. And we see the truth that history is not made by governments, it is shaped by the people who endure its consequences. The Vietnam War remains one of the most painful chapters in modern memory. But it also serves as a reminder: understanding matters more than assumption. Humanity matters more than ideology, and the greatest victories are not won by weapons but by compassion, humility, and the courage to rise after tragedy. The story of Vietnam is not simply a war story. It is a human story, one that continues to whisper through generations, asking us to listen, to learn, and to never forget the cost of misunderstanding the world we try to change.